So, podcast number 1 on Lola's poem that she did a prezi on in last lesson. You start with the opening of an image of the war graves. What's the significance of that?
Well, I chose a picture of the war graves because my poem's called Another Epitaph on an Army of Mercenaries, and an epitaph is a message usually left on the grave on a gravestone, and so I thought that was an appropriate
Who writes
symbol.
them? Do you know?
To family members or loved ones.
Okay. Yeah, I usually get a letter with some lines available for whatever they want to write on it, and of course the majority had lines of poetry. There's one in the Psalm that we're going to see where it's the mother gets it the wrong way around. Instead of putting the address in the address box, she puts it in the Epitaph box.
Does she?
Yeah, so which is quite. It's even more poignant because when you see his grave, you see the address of home in France. So it's quite poignant. Anyway, okay, so this is your poem. And a bit of contextual detail about Hugh McDermott. Anything about him that struck you as worthy of note?
Well, when I was researching him, I was kind of shocked to find out that he was a communist and that he never actually served in the war. And I realised that that informs his writing a lot. And there's always a difference between, in the literature, of people who actually fight and those who just kind of stay on the sidelines and give their perspective of what's happening. And I think that's exactly what he did. He just wrote this poem as a symbol of what he believed to be correct.
You made a really great point in the lesson about his voice and how it's quite an uncommon voice.
Definitely.
And very unpopular at the time of writing, which I thought was very good. Clearly the epitaph,
I just wanted to put the two poems.
Do you want to explain that?
Hugh McDermott is a response to a poem called An Epitaph on an Army of Mercenaries by A.E. Housman, in which Housman praises the efforts of mercenaries, whereas when McDermott wrote his poem, he was condemning them and calling them murderers and saying that they worked for blood money and they took ungodly risks and died.
Impious.
And
I like that.
Things like that.
So it's a reactionary poem to something by Housman. Do you know how Housman's was received at all? Did you read about that?
His was received quite well because obviously his is a common voice. He's praising the soldiers, and everybody did that because back then it was very, very uncommon while war was going on for someone to say, this is wrong, or what the soldiers, the people who are fighting in our name, what they're doing is wrong. And so his poem was received quite well, whereas McDermott's wasn't received well, and he wrote his later. He wrote his in 1935, whereas Housman wrote his in 1917. So.
I see. So it's not that reaction. It's not a knee-jerk reaction.
No, it's
from
not.
McDermott
It's not.
at all.
Definitely not a knee-jerk reaction.
It sounds like it, doesn't it, with his opening line? Where do you stand? Who do you?
See, I feel like I understand where McDermott's coming from. I understand that kind of uncommon voice about war because I think it's all dependent on what your personal beliefs of war are, because I don't think McDermott isn't saying that the soldiers are not brave and he's just saying that what they're doing is wrong, and the way that they've been paid to do it, there's something morally shady, like something morally incorrect with that. And nobody likes to talk about that. Everybody likes to think of the honour in war and the bravery and the courage of the men. And yes, they're brave, and yes, they're courageous, but you also have to think of the consequences of war and the civilian deaths and stuff like that.
I want to get to the opening, the goddamn lie.
I thought that was such a strong way to start a poem, and so aggressive and so direct as well. So there's no way as readers that we can infer that he can't make up his mind. He definitely
There's
knows
no ambiguity to this poem.
No ambiguity whatsoever.
And it's very original. I mean, no other poem, and we're never going to forget this poem.
Definitely.
I want to get to the bit where it's about that's the professional murders, because you talked about it being something about evil, taking money.
He said they took their blood money and impious risk and died. So I said from that he was basically saying that the fact that they took money in order to fight, there was something like morally incorrect about that. There's something odd about a soldier being paid to kill another soldier. So they did it out of not a love of country, but a love of money, and that's again a quite brave accusation to the men who fought on his behalf. And I felt when I was reading it, like, how dare he sometimes, because he didn't fight. He served in the army corps, but he didn't fight, and so he doesn't really know what it's like to be a soldier. But in the same way, I think his voice is so important, that because then you can have a discussion
because
about...
they fought, he's entitled to his voice.
Exactly.
If they hadn't have fought,
he wouldn't have been. So there's that kind of like irony with it. He can only speak because they fought for him.
Wow. In spite of their kind, yeah, I like that bit. Oh yeah, there's some elements of worth with difficulty persist here and there on Earth. He sounds like he's almost annoyed that mercenaries still exist.
And he kind of says his whole outlook on the world is bleak. What I thought he was saying was basically that there is worth in the world, but it's being pushed away, it's being pushed back. It's existing with difficulty, and he's kind of accusing humanity of not allowing worth to exist in our world.
And then it moves on to your next poem. But we'll leave it there, I think, with the end of that one. Excellent. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.